We were talking, weren't we, before, or we know the Premier League title bid is done for Arsenal.
Don't remind me, man.
Sorry about that. What chances do you have, though, if any, that maybe potentially you could maybe be the dark horses of the Champions League and upset people this season and go all the way?
I mean, off air, you were selling me a great story when you was bringing up, the 05 Liverpool and the couple of Chelsea sides. But nah, I mean, we've got a small percentage because we're in the competition, but we need a fit Bukayo Saka. We're relying on kids, and as much as we're joking about Mikel Moreno playing up front, it's a tough ask. And with all due respect to Mikel Arteta, you've got Simeone, Carlo Ancelotti, even Unai Emery, our former manager, that are significantly experienced. I just don't know if we can control those fine margins when push comes to shove. But I hope I'm wrong, Sam.
So haven't you kind of answered your own question there? You said Bukayo Saka to come back. I mean, the thing is, if Bukayo Saka comes back in April, doesn't that change everything? And also, if you look at Bukayo Saka, a guy who's needed a rest for a really long time, or ideally...
He's had a good one here, hasn't he?
He doesn't have a 3-month rest, but it's an enforced rest. And maybe the best Saka of the season comes back.
I hope you're right, but we're going to need him to get fit and up to speed. And I'm very wary of putting all of my hopes into Bukayo Saka on the best of days, much less a fully fit and not fully fit one.
Yeah.
We're going to need him. We're going to need him. I just don't think we have enough. I think to a degree, when it comes to winning the Champions League, it's not how good you are necessarily all the time. It's how good are you at your worst. If you're poor for 89 minutes, who is just going to get that winner? I mean, we've just been talking about Real Madrid. With all due respect to them, they haven't been amazing every time they've won the Champions League. But when Ancelotti raises his eyebrows and they get going, it happens. So
you're obsessed with his eyebrows, aren't you? You mentioned the eyebrows about 5 times this evening.
I mean, it's iconic, man. I wish I had his eyebrows.
Look into that camera and give it a go if you want. There we go. Get your new Instagram profile picture.
Oh, you're funny, man.
So maybe that's the next step for Carlo Ancelotti, the next James Bond. Following in the footsteps of Sir Roger Moore.
I really thought you were going to say the next step, he'd be joining us next season on TalkSPORT Goals, Andy, in that chair over there. It'd be Ancelotti, Andy and Ellard on TalkSPORT Goals. CJ just said there that to win the key part, Andy, of winning the Champions League is when you're at your worst to still be able to get over the line. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it is. You've just got to find a way. But I guess the question really with Arsenal, can they defend well enough to win the Champions League? That's the real question, isn't it? And that's what I've had doubts with over their Premier League form over the last couple of months.
It's a big ask in the Champions League for 180 minutes. I actually think we can defend quite well. I'm more confident in our ability to keep a clean sheet than to score a goal. But you're asking a big ask. We've just been talking about Julian Alvarez, kind of the man of the moment for Atletico. And I don't need to tell you guys about the quality that Real Madrid has. Interesting question, though. Who do you think has more of a chance in the Champions League? Arsenal or Aston Villa?
Maybe just because of the draw. Not that obviously PSG are a bad team, but you still would probably rather face PSG than Real Madrid. And I think Real Madrid will get through tonight.
I don't know. Maybe, have PSG changed that perception?
Yeah, you might be underplaying Enrique.
By the way they played in the 2 games against Liverpool. Because if there's one reason to back against PSG in this season's Champions League now, it's just that they've just played 2 games of an unbelievably high standard, and those are 2 of the best Champions League games you will see in a long time.
I agree.
And that's something that shouldn't be forgotten, by the way. You're absolutely right.
Shouldn't.
Because people look back on that
16.
and people look back at a 1-1 aggregate over 2 legs, the last 16, and think nothing of it. In terms of pure entertainment and pure drama, that's 2 of the best games of football you're going to watch, especially the game last night.
The level of the quality was extraordinary, and no one's done that to Liverpool this season. No one's even come close to doing that to Liverpool this season. But I think if there's one reason to back against PSG, is that you get through those 2 epic games. You're like, are we only just in the quarterfinals still? So that's the only thing. If you're them,
the criticism of PSG is they've almost played too well too early. Basically saying
that's all you can say.
Yeah. Be scrappy in the last 16. Maybe save that for the semi-finals. I want to just ask you a question, Andy. Something that CJ said about Mikel Arteta. He obviously names a couple of managers: your Emery's, your Ancelotti's, your Simeone's, who we obviously know are way more experienced than Arteta. In terms of him as a coach, do you think he's tactically good enough as a coach to be a Champions League winning manager?
He's still learning, but worse coaches have won the Champions League. There's no doubt about that. There we go. There we go, straight off. Because I think, as we've said, it is about your individuals as well. I think it's easy to say that we love to think of the coaches masterminding it. That's not always the case, is it? I think there's other ways that it happens as well. Look, I think Arsenal do have a a chance in this. I think because we think of Emery being so good in European competition, that would lead a lot of people, especially with the attacking options they've got, to say that Villa have got the best chance. I just don't see how they get past PSG. Like, PSG have been so good in the past 3 months. The best team in Europe in the past 3 months is finally clicked for them. But of course, every team's only a couple of injuries away from it being a completely different conversation.
Don't ask Arsenal fans about
injuries. Don't get me started, man.
We'll be here all day, Andy, doing an Arsenal.
Dortmund are through, by the way. They've just completed a 2-1 win at Lille, go through 3-2 on aggregate.
So Borussia Dortmund become the 5th team to reach the quarterfinals of the Champions League. When Saka does come back and we get deep in the Champions League, how do you think would Saka play on the right and Nwaneri plays as the false 9, or do you think it's still Mourinho would always be the 9 in this kind of new Arsenal team with no Havertz and with no Gabriel Jesus?
I can't believe you're asking me this. The minute Bukayo Saka is back, that right wing is his.
Sure.
It's interesting.
So who goes? You can't drop Nwaneri, can you?
Realistically, it'd probably be Mikel Merino. I do think the age will go against Nwaneri. I wouldn't be against that. I'd actually go with something that I'm not a fan of. I just think, considering the climate we're at, I'd actually put Martinelli through the middle. I'd put Martinelli through the middle, Saka on the right. Maybe give or take, I might try something with Nwaneri on the left, but Arteta would probably go for Trossard. You never know, man. Maybe Sterling leads us all the way, though.
There we go. That would be... We were talking earlier, the most unlikely Arsenal goal scorer in the Champions League final. Someone said Kieran Tierney, but then you said Raheem Sterling. And that really would be the most incredible way to finish off the most bizarre loan spell in the history of football, right?
Bizarre, man.
It's just strange, isn't it?
Bizarre. And it's weird in that, as an Arsenal fan, you had almost zero expectations and somehow you're more disappointed. I don't know if it's down to Raheem Sterling or the management. Like, it's just not gone well, has he? And I think the most concerning thing for me with Raheem Sterling, beyond everything, and I know you need to play games and build up your fitness, physically, unfortunately, he looks shot. Maybe that's because he started playing at 16, 17 and it's caught up with him.
Similes with Wayne Rooney. It feels like he's 16, 17, playing so many games, and they just... Andy, with PSV, it was strange in that first leg because early on they had chances, didn't they? Didn't take them, and then every time Arsenal shot, they scored. PSV a better team than perhaps that scoreline suggested last week.
Well, they'd have to be, wouldn't they? I mean, everything that could go wrong did go wrong in that first leg for them, Sam. But I think the problem is you see the limitations of Peter Bosz as a coach in a game against a good team like Arsenal there, in that once they conceded a couple of avoidable goals, if we're being honest. But if we go back to the start, the first couple are avoidable, and they kind of set the tone. Yes, and they're like a gambler chasing their losses, a Peter Bosz team that's losing. So they're like, we've got to go for it now. It's like, do you? Yeah. Really? Because they managed to play themselves out of contention. I mean, obviously, Peter Bosz famously, or infamously, when he was in charge of Dortmund, said plan B is to do plan A better. And that really underlines it. Now, he's had a brilliant time at PSV, won a league title for the first time as a coach. Remember, he's in his 60s now. Big disciple of Johan Cruyff, but it's like Cruyff pastiche, really. You know, it's just way too open. Yeah, and that's the problem. Now, whereas they managed to use that to their advantage against Juventus, no, brilliant against Juventus in the playoff round, particularly in the home leg. To go from that to what's happened against Arsenal, which is really the culmination of everything that's gone wrong for them in this calendar year. Remember, Ajax are 8 points clear at the top. A very average, in my opinion, Ajax side are 8 points clear at the top of the Eredivisie, which looked like PSV's for the first couple of months of the season. They carried on from where they left off last campaign. It's been the defensive problems. The second season of Peter Bosz has been a little bit like Ten Hag's last season at Ajax, whereas after Christmas, the defence falls off spectacularly. They've been conceding 2.5 goals a game in this calendar year, and it only goes down to over 2 still if you take away the Arsenal game from the numbers. So that has been the recurring problem for them.
On AM, on DAB, via the TalkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. TalkSPORT.